Welcome to the STR Intelligence Weekly Regulations Roundup, your source for the latest news on short-term rental regulations across the country. I'm your host, Nora. This week we have updates from Phoenix, Arizona, Alpharetta, Georgia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, New Orleans, Louisiana, Augusta, Georgia, and St. Louis, Missouri. We start first in Phoenix, where the city has adopted new regulations on short-term rentals after residents complained of noise, parties, and other disruptions. The rules require owners to obtain permits, give neighbors notice, conduct background checks, and carry insurance. Fines and permit suspensions can be imposed for violations. But some say state law still limits the city's ability to regulate short-term rentals. The rules take effect in November, but enforcement starts in 2024. Residents are glad for the new regulations, but say more could be done. The city argues its hands are tied by state law. Next up, we turn our attention to Alpharetta. The Alpharetta City Council is considering its first ordinance to regulate short-term rentals. It would revise the zoning code to allow rentals with a permit in agricultural areas and require licensing operational rules. This aims to monitor rental activity after the growth of short-term rentals. Mayor Gilvin initiated it due to residents' concerns about regulating short-term rentals in neighborhoods. Most council members supported addressing growth, though one cautioned against bureaucracy for a minority. The proposal is still in the early stages and subject to change with future council discussion. Heading to the state of Pennsylvania, after years of debate, the Pittsburgh City Council gave preliminary approval to legislation requiring rental unit owners to obtain permits. Previous rental registries were struck down in courts. The new bill requires owners of short and long-term rentals to apply for permits through the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections. Owners get provisional permits until inspections occur. Inspections check for building code and safety compliance. Owners must fix any issues found. Permits must be renewed yearly with inspections every 3 years, fees to be set later. The goal is to keep rental info updated. New rules likely take effect in 2024. A separate bill requires a permit for parking permits. Bills could get final approval next week. Jumping over to the Big Easy, New Orleans. After recently proposing a ban on short-term rentals in residential zones, the New Orleans City Council has temporarily paused new commercial short-term rentals in the city until a comprehensive study on STR regulations can be completed. The council approved a new interim zoning district that limits short-term rentals to 1 unit or 25% of total units on a property. For the CBD5 district, short-term rentals are only allowed in buildings with 10-plus units that trigger affordable housing requirements. The pause allows the council time to evaluate STR's impacts in the commercial zones before issuing new regulations. Back in the state of Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, to be specific, the city is debating passing regulations on short-term rentals. Complaints about noise and trash have arisen, but officials say there aren't enough to warrant action yet. Some commissioners want regulations to prevent issues, but others don't want to limit property rights without necessity. Currently, there are 676 short-term rentals in Augusta, with most issues during the Masters tournament and other big events. The city decided to monitor for now, but some want written policies for a proactive approach. Lastly, we find ourselves looking at St. Louis, where a group called Neighborhoods Are for Neighbors was formed to push for tighter regulation of short-term rentals in St. Louis. They propose limiting operators to city residents and allowing only primary residences plus 2 units in residential areas. Alderman Brett Narayan has introduced bills requiring permits, inspections, 24/7 contacts, and limits out-of-state operators to 4 units each. He says regulations are needed to reduce party houses and ensure accountability, but is open to suggestions. Short-term rental operators argue that the regulations are unnecessary and they improve neighborhoods. The Aldermanic Committee plans to hold a hearing soon. That's it for this edition of the STR Intelligence Weekly Regulations Roundup. Don't forget to visit our YouTube to stay up to date on the latest STR regulation news and analysis. We post new videos every week, so hit the bell to get notified when a new one drops. You can also listen to the STR Intelligence Weekly podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leaving a review helps others find the show. Also, if you enjoy listening to our weekly podcast, make sure to sign up for our newsletter at strintelligence.com and get these regulations and more sent directly to your inbox. Be sure to tune in next week as we bring you the latest short-term rental news from across the nation.